The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on Aurora Thompson's weathered hands as she stitched a torn hem. At 64, her fingers still moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades bringing fabric to life. The quiet of her Portland home was broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from Robert, her late husband. "Just a few more stitches," she murmured to herself, tying off the thread with a practiced flourish. Aurora's small ranch house on the eastern edge of Portland wasn't grand, but every corner held a memory. The handmade curtains she'd sewn when they first moved in, the dining table where Robert had helped their son with homework, the garden out back where she still grew tomatoes and zucchini during Oregon's brief but generous summer months. She had paid off the mortgage 5 years ago, the final payment a quiet victory after decades of saving every spare dollar from her work at Riverside Textiles. Now the house was truly hers, the culmination of a lifetime of work, and the one thing she could truly call her own. The phone rang, startling her from her reverie. "Mom, it's Nathan." Her son's voice carried that familiar tension, a mixture of forced cheerfulness and underlying stress. At 38, Nathan had never quite found his footing despite the business degree Aurora and Robert had sacrificed to pay for. "Hello, sweetheart. Is everything all right?" Aurora asked, her maternal instinct detecting trouble. "Well, not exactly." The pause that followed felt heavy. "Vanessa and we've been having some problems with our apartment. The landlord raised the rent again, and with Sophie's school expenses." Aurora's heart sank. She'd heard variations of this conversation before. "How much do you need this time?" she asked gently, mentally calculating what remained of her modest savings. "That's the thing, Mom. It's not just about money this time. Another pause. "We're being evicted. The building's going condo, and we can't find another place we can afford. Not in any decent school district for Sophie." Aurora closed her eyes, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "What I'm asking is, could we stay with you just for a few months until we save for a deposit on a new place? We'd help with utilities, groceries, everything." Her first instinct was to say yes immediately. This was her son, her only child, and her beloved granddaughter. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the way Vanessa had looked around the house during their last visit, her eyes calculating, measuring, as if taking inventory. "Sophie would love to spend more time with you," Nathan added, his voice softening. "She misses her grandma." And with those words, Aurora's resistance crumbled. 9-year-old Sophie, with her gap-toothed smile and curious questions, was the light of Aurora's life. The thought of having her little footsteps echo through the quiet halls again was too tempting to resist. "Of course you can stay," Aurora heard herself saying. "This house has plenty of room." "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. We'll be there Saturday." After hanging up, Aurora stood by the window watching a hummingbird dart among her fuchsias. A flicker of unease passed through her, but she pushed it aside. Family helped family. That's how she was raised, and that's how she'd raised Nathan. Still, as she moved through the rooms of her house, she found herself taking mental inventory of her belongings. The silver tea set from her mother, Robert's collection of first edition mystery novels, the antique sewing machine that had funded Sophie's last birthday present. On Saturday morning, Aurora woke early to prepare. She changed the linens in the guest room and Nathan's old bedroom, now used for storage, but easily converted back. She baked blueberry muffins, Sophie's favorite. By 10 o'clock, everything was ready. The moving truck arrived just after noon, larger than Aurora had expected for a temporary stay. Nathan jumped down from the driver's seat, his smile tight but genuine as he embraced his mother. "Thanks again, Mom. This means everything to us." Vanessa emerged from the passenger side, her styled blonde hair and manicured nails at odds with the casual clothes she wore for moving day. At 35, she remained as polished as the day Nathan had introduced her 6 years ago. Beautiful, yes, but with a coolness that Aurora had never quite warmed to. "Aurora," she said, air-kissing her mother-in-law's cheek, "you're a saint for taking us in, truly." Before Aurora could respond, a small figure barreled into her, nearly knocking her off balance. "Grandma, I'm going to live with you." Sophie's arms wrapped tight around Aurora's waist, her excitement palpable. "Yes, you are, my sweet girl." Aurora laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing as she hugged her granddaughter. "And I've made your favorite muffins to celebrate." The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity as boxes and furniture were carried inside. Aurora noticed with growing concern how many possessions they were bringing for what was supposed to be a temporary arrangement. A sectional sofa that clearly wouldn't fit in the guest room. a massive flat-screen television, multiple dressers and bookshelves. "Where do you want this, Vanessa?" one of Nathan's friends asked, struggling with a designer coffee table. Vanessa surveyed Aurora's living room, her eyes landing on the well-worn but cherished coffee table that had been in this house for 20 years. "We can move that old one to the garage," she said, not bothering to consult Aurora. "This one will look much better in here." Aurora opened her mouth to protest, but caught Nathan's pleading look. "Don't make this difficult," his eyes seemed to say. "Not on the first day." So she said nothing, watching as her furniture was carried away and replaced with Vanessa's modern pieces. "It's just a table," she told herself, "just a temporary arrangement." But as the day wore on and more of her carefully chosen items were shifted, replaced, or relocated without her input, that initial flicker of unease grew into something more persistent. After the moving helpers left, Nathan cracked open a beer and sank into their new sofa. "Mom, you have no idea how much stress you've saved us." Vanessa was at her breaking point. "We were," Vanessa agreed, arranging decorative pillows that had replaced Aurora's handmade ones. "My parents offered to help, but their place is so small and my mother would drive me crazy within a week." Aurora nodded, trying to focus on the relief in her son's face rather than the casual way Vanessa was already claiming space. "I'm happy to help," she said truthfully. "Family is the most important thing." That night, lying in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a full house, Nathan's bass laughter, Vanessa's quick steps across the kitchen floor, Sophie's muffled giggles, Aurora tried to convince herself that her discomfort was just resistance to change. After 7 years alone since Robert's death, she'd grown accustomed to solitude. Sharing space again would take adjustment, that's all. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the way Vanessa had looked around the master bedroom before saying, "This room gets such beautiful morning light. Sophie and I are both morning people, you know." The first month passed with surprising ease. Nathan kept his promise to help with utilities, handing Aurora cash for his share of the electric bill. Sophie's presence filled the house with a joy Aurora hadn't realized she'd been missing. Even Vanessa seemed to be making an effort, occasionally cooking dinner for everyone or helping with the dishes. But as winter settled over Portland, bringing its characteristic gray skies and persistent rain, subtle shifts began to occur. It started with the kitchen cabinets. Aurora returned from her part-time job at Stitch and Save, the local alteration shop, to find everything rearranged. "I hope you don't mind," Vanessa said, not looking up from her laptop at the dining table. "The old setup just wasn't practical. Now the pots are near the stove where they should be." Aurora stood in the doorway of her own kitchen, suddenly feeling like a visitor. The organization system she'd maintained for decades, the one that made perfect sense to her hands and habits, had been dismantled without consultation. "I suppose that makes sense," she conceded, though it didn't to her. She'd have to relearn where everything was kept in her own home. That weekend, Aurora's favorite reading chair, a comfortable if worn recliner that had been positioned perfectly by the living room window, had been moved to the corner to make room for an exercise bike Vanessa had ordered. "It'll just be temporary," Nathan assured her, though the chair remained wedged in its new position, facing a wall, instead of the garden view Aurora had cherished. The changes accelerated. New towels replaced Aurora's in the bathrooms. The refrigerator was suddenly stocked with organic juices and specialty foods that left little room for Aurora's simpler groceries. The walls once adorned with family photos Aurora had carefully framed now featured abstract prints Vanessa had brought from their apartment. 6 weeks into the arrangement, Aurora was preparing a tuna casserole, Nathan's favorite as a boy, when Vanessa walked in frowning at the dish. "We're actually trying to cut back on processed foods," she said, opening the refrigerator. "I got some quinoa and kale for dinner tonight." Aurora glanced down at the casserole she'd been making for 30 years. "Nathan's always loved this recipe." "People's tastes change," Vanessa said with a tight smile. "And you know, Aurora, you should really consider your cholesterol at your age. All that canned soup can't be good for your heart." That night, Aurora ate a small portion of the quinoa salad, the unfamiliar textures and flavors doing little to satisfy her. Nathan, she noticed, took seconds complimenting Vanessa's healthy cooking while the casserole sat untouched on the counter. The next morning, Aurora headed across the street to Martha Jenkins' house for their weekly coffee date, a ritual they'd maintained for nearly a decade. At 70, Martha was Aurora's closest friend, a retired school teacher with a straight-shooting manner that Aurora had always appreciated. "You look exhausted," Martha observed as Aurora sank into a chair at her kitchen table. "How's it going with the house guests? Aurora sighed, wrapping her hands around the warm mug Martha offered. They're family. It's an adjustment, but we're managing. Martha's eyebrows rose over her reading glasses. That wasn't what I asked. It's just little things. Aurora struggled to articulate feelings she'd been suppressing. Vanessa keeps rearranging everything, changing things without asking. I feel like I'm suddenly living in someone else's house. Have you talked to Nathan about it? Aurora shook her head. He seems so grateful they have a place to stay, and they're under financial strain. I don't want to seem petty about furniture arrangements. Martha leaned forward. Boundaries aren't petty, Aurora. This is your house. You've earned the right to have things the way you want them. I know, but… Aurora was interrupted by her phone buzzing. A text from Nathan. Where are you? Vanessa needs your help with Sophie. I have to go, Aurora said, rising reluctantly. Sophie's school has an early release today. Martha walked her to the door. Just remember what I said. Boundaries. Otherwise people will take and take until there's nothing left. Aurora nodded, but as she crossed back to her house, she already knew she wouldn't confront Nathan or Vanessa. The temporary peace was worth the small sacrifices. Or so she thought until she walked into her bedroom that evening to find Vanessa measuring the windows. What are you doing? Aurora asked, her voice sharper than intended. Vanessa turned unfazed. Just checking dimensions for new curtains. These old ones are fading and they're not very energy efficient. Aurora's chest tightened. The old curtains were ones she'd sewn herself 5 years ago from fabric she'd carefully selected to match the bedroom's palette. I don't want new curtains, she said firmly. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Aurora, we're just trying to help modernize a bit. This place could use some updating. This place is my home and I like it as it is. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them before Vanessa sighed dramatically. I was just trying to help. Nathan mentioned the heating bills were high last winter, but if you'd rather waste money… That night Aurora couldn't sleep, Martha's warning about boundaries echoing in her mind. She resolved to speak with Nathan in the morning to gently but firmly establish some ground rules. But morning brought a different conversation entirely. Mom, Nathan said over breakfast, Vanessa and Sophie already gone to school drop-off. I've been meaning to talk to you about the sleeping arrangements. Aurora looked up from her toast wariness creeping through her. What about them? It's just that Sophie's growing and she needs her own space, and the guest room is pretty small for both Vanessa and me with all our stuff. Aurora set down her tea. What are you suggesting? Nathan wouldn't meet her eyes. We were thinking, your room is much bigger. It has that walk-in closet and the attached bathroom. It would make more sense for us to take the master bedroom, and you could move to the guest room. The request knocked the wind from Aurora's lungs. Her bedroom, the one she'd shared with Robert until his final days, the one with the bay window where she sat each morning to watch the sunrise, was being claimed. That's my room, Nathan, she said quietly. It has been for 40 years. I know Mom and I wouldn't ask, but Sophie really needs more space. And you're just one person. You don't need all that room. Aurora stared at her son, this grown man who had once been the baby she cradled in that very bedroom. When had he become someone who could ask such a thing without hesitation? I'll think about it, she said finally, unable to summon the strength for confrontation. But by the weekend, thinking about it had become irrelevant. She returned from grocery shopping to find Vanessa directing Nathan and a friend as they moved Aurora's dresser down the hallway. What are you doing? Aurora cried, dropping her shopping bags. We're helping you move, Vanessa said brightly. You've been so busy we thought we'd surprise you and get it done. I never agreed to this, Aurora protested, looking desperately to Nathan. He at least had the decency to appear uncomfortable. Mom, we talked about this. It makes more sense this way. The guest room is cozy and you'll be more comfortable there. I was comfortable in my own bedroom, Aurora said, her voice rising uncharacteristically. The bedroom I've slept in for 40 years. Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. Aurora, please don't make this difficult. We're a family of 3. You're just one person. It's simple math. This is my house. Aurora said the words coming out in a whisper that betrayed her shock more than a shout would have. And we're grateful, Nathan interjected quickly. So grateful you're letting us stay. This is just a practical solution while we're here. But even as he said it, Aurora could see the lie forming. This wasn't temporary. Something had shifted, and they weren't treating the arrangement as temporary at all. That night, Aurora lay in the guest room, her new room apparently listening to the unfamiliar sounds. The water heater clicking on and off right outside her door. The hum of the washing machine vibrating through the wall. This room had never been intended for long-term sleeping. It was smaller, darker, tucked away from the home's main spaces. She closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. When she'd agreed to let them stay, she'd never imagined giving up her own bedroom. How had it happened so quickly? And what else would she be expected to surrender? February arrived with the unexpected heating bills that made Aurora gasp when she opened the envelope. $347, nearly double what she typically paid, even during Portland's damp, chilly winters. She sat at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, working through her monthly budget with growing dismay. Her modest pension from Riverside Textiles and the part-time income from Stitch and Save had always been sufficient for her modest needs. But supporting 4 people instead of 1 was rapidly depleting the careful financial cushion she'd maintained. "Is that the heating bill?" Nathan asked, walking in with his morning coffee. "I meant to check the mail yesterday." Aurora slid the bill across the table. "It's quite a bit higher than usual." Nathan whistled. "Wow, that's steep. Must be that cold snap we had." He pulled out his wallet and counted out some bills. "Here's $100 toward it. Sorry I can't do more right now. We've got Sophie's dance class fees due this week." Aurora accepted the money, not mentioning that $100 barely covered the increase, let alone Nathan's family's share of the actual bill. She'd expected them to contribute at least half, given there were 3 of them to her 1. "Thanks," she said instead, tucking the bills into her purse. "How's the job search going?" Nathan's expression clouded. "Still looking. The logistics company is going through some restructuring, so they're not hiring at the level I'm qualified for." He'd been laid off 2 months ago, a fact he'd only mentioned after moving in. "But Vanessa's got some promising leads for design clients." Aurora nodded, though she'd yet to see any evidence of Vanessa securing freelance interior design work. What she had seen was Vanessa's online shopping packages arriving almost daily, new clothes, home decor items, specialty foods from upscale markets. Later that afternoon, Aurora was hemming a wedding dress for a client when her cell phone rang. The bank's name flashed on the screen. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Craig from First Oregon Bank. I'm calling about your credit card payment." Aurora frowned. "I mailed that last week. It should have arrived by now." "We haven't received it yet," Craig said. "And since you're now approaching 30 days past due, I wanted to check in." "Past due?" Aurora set down her sewing. "That can't be right. I always pay on time." "Let me pull up your account." A pause. "Yes, I'm showing the last payment was in December, and there were some rather large charges in January that increased your balance significantly." Aurora's stomach dropped. "What kind of charges?" "Well, there was a purchase at Best Electronics for $1,299, another at Furniture Warehouse for $899, and several smaller charges at various department stores." Aurora's hands began to shake. She hadn't made any of those purchases. She hadn't even been to those stores. But someone had used her credit card, and she had a sinking feeling she knew who. "I'll look into this and call you back," she managed to say before hanging up. She found Vanessa in the living room scrolling through her phone on the new sectional sofa that had mysteriously appeared last month, a sofa Aurora now suspected she might have inadvertently paid for. "Did you use my credit card?" Aurora asked without preamble. Vanessa looked up, surprise flashing briefly across her face before her features smoothed. "Oh, for the new TV and a few other things. Yes, I meant to mention that. Nathan said it was okay." "Nathan said—" Aurora stopped, struggling to maintain composure. "That's my personal credit card, Vanessa, not a family account." Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. "We're family, aren't we? And those purchases benefit everyone. The new TV has much better resolution for Sophie's educational programs, and the sofa makes the living room more functional for all of us." "But I can't afford those things," Aurora said, her voice tight. "I'm on a fixed income." Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. "Well, we needed them, and Nathan's job situation is temporary. We'll pay you back when things improve." Her tone made it clear she considered the matter closed. Aurora stood rooted to the spot, a lifetime of avoiding confrontation warring with the stark reality of her financial situation. Finally, she turned and walked to her room. No, the guest room, she corrected herself bitterly and closed the door. She called the credit card company, immediately reporting the unauthorized charges and requesting a new card. She also changed her online banking password and requested that all her statements be sent to a new email address, one Nathan and Vanessa didn't know. That evening, she waited until after Sophie had gone to bed to confront Nathan. "Did you tell Vanessa she could use my credit card?" she asked, finding him alone in the kitchen. Nathan's face registered guilt. "She mentioned borrowing it for a few necessities. I didn't realize it was going to be for big purchases." "Nathan, I can't afford those kinds of expenses. My retirement isn't enough to support all of us at this level." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Robert that Aurora's heart ached despite her anger. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. Things have been tight since I lost my job, and Vanessa was getting anxious about making the place comfortable for Sophie." "This is already a comfortable home," Aurora said quietly. "It always has been." Nathan had the grace to look ashamed. "You're right. I'll talk to her about the spending." He hesitated. "But Mom, could you just cover this month's credit card bill? I promise we'll start contributing more once I find work." Aurora stared at her son, this man she'd raised to be responsible and considerate. When had he become someone who thought it acceptable to burden his mother with debt? "I'll pay it this time," she said finally. "But I've reported the card stolen and ordered a new one. No one uses my credit card from now on, not for any reason." Nathan nodded, but she saw something in his expression, a flicker of resentment, as if she were the one being unreasonable. The next week brought another financial shock when Aurora opened the water bill. Their usage had tripled since Nathan's family moved in. Long showers, multiple loads of laundry daily, the dishwasher running for just a few items, it all added up. She began keeping closer track of household expenses, noting with growing alarm how much more she was spending on groceries, utilities, and miscellaneous items. Nathan's contribution remained inconsistent and insufficient, while their consumption increased. To make ends meet, Aurora began taking on extra alteration work. She stayed late at Stitch and Save and brought projects home sewing into the night, while the rest of the household slept. The additional income helped, but the pace was exhausting for a woman in her 60s. "You look tired," Martha observed during their weekly coffee. "Are you sleeping?" Aurora shook her head. "Not well. I'm worried about money, Martha. They're spending so much and contributing so little." "Have you been direct with them about expenses?" "I've tried. Nathan always apologizes and promises it will change, but it never does. And Vanessa acts like I'm being stingy when I bring it up." Martha's expression darkened. "This isn't right, Aurora. They're taking advantage of you." "They're family," Aurora said, the excuse sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Family doesn't drain you dry," Martha replied firmly. The breaking point came when Aurora returned home one afternoon to find a construction crew in her backyard. They were dismantling the raised garden beds Robert had built, the ones where she still grew vegetables every summer, a connection to her late husband and their shared love of gardening. "What's happening?" she cried, rushing through the house to the back door. Vanessa stood supervising a designer sun hat, shading her face. "Oh, Aurora, isn't it exciting? We're putting in a patio entertainment area, much more functional than those old garden boxes." "Those are my gardens," Aurora said, her voice trembling. "Robert built them. I grow food in them." Vanessa's smile dimmed slightly. "Well, it's a bit late now. The crew's already removed most of them. And really, Aurora, at your age, you shouldn't be bending and kneeling in garden soil anyway. It's not good for your joints." Aurora watched in horror as the last of the wooden boxes, weathered, yes, but still sturdy, still full of memories, was broken apart and tossed into a pile of debris. "Who's paying for this?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "Oh, don't worry about that," Vanessa said airily. "We've worked it out." Later, Aurora discovered what "worked out" meant. Nathan had opened a home improvement loan in Aurora's name, $5,000 charged against her home equity with her digital signature on documents she'd never seen. "How could you do this?" she demanded that night, the loan papers clutched in her shaking hand. Nathan had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mom, the patio adds value to the house. It's an investment. And we knew you'd be worried about the cost, so we handled the details. By forging my signature, by taking out a loan in my name without my knowledge or consent, that's fraud, Nathan." "It's not fraud between family," Vanessa interjected, entering the kitchen with a glass of wine. "You would have signed eventually. We just saved some time." Aurora stared at them both, these strangers who had invaded her home, her finances, her life. For the first time, she felt something beyond frustration and hurt. She felt fear. If they could do this, what else might they do? That night she called Martha, her voice low as she huddled in her small bedroom. "I need your help." She admitted the words difficult to speak aloud. "I think I'm in real trouble here." March brought the first hints of spring to Portland cherry blossoms, appearing on the trees lining Aurora's street, daffodils pushing through the soil in what remained of her front garden. But inside the house, the atmosphere grew increasingly cold. Since confronting Nathan and Vanessa about the unauthorized loan, Aurora had noticed a shift in their behavior toward her. Conversations stopped abruptly when she entered a room. Dinner invitations were forgotten until the meal was already underway. Her opinion on household matters was neither sought nor welcomed. Most painful was the distance being created between her and Sophie. Once the little girl had sought her out daily, eager to share school stories or have Aurora teach her simple sewing stitches. Now Sophie was increasingly diverted to other activities whenever she and Aurora began spending time together. "Sophie, haven't you finished your homework yet?" Vanessa would interrupt their baking session. "Sophie, we have that thing we need to do now," Nathan would announce when he found his daughter looking through photo albums with her grandmother. One Saturday morning, Aurora was showing Sophie how to make Robert's famous blueberry pancakes when Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. "Sophie, go wash up. We're meeting friends for breakfast." The girl looked uncertainly between her grandmother and mother. "But Grandma and I are making pancakes." "Now, Sophie," Vanessa said firmly, "the Hendersons are waiting. They have a daughter your age." After Sophie reluctantly left, Aurora turned to Vanessa. "We'd already started cooking. You could have told us earlier about your plans." Vanessa's smile was cool. "Well, Sophie needs to spend time with children her own age, not just her elderly grandmother. It's important for her social development." The words stung deliberately, calculated to emphasize the age gap and suggest Aurora's company was somehow insufficient. That evening, Aurora heard Vanessa on the phone in the living room, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Yes, we're still living with Nathan's mother. I know it's not ideal, but the housing market is impossible right now. She's getting quite forgetful, actually. We have to watch the stove when she's cooking, make sure she turns things off." Aurora froze in the hallway, her hand gripping the wall for support. Forgetful, she had never left a burner on in her life. She was still sharp enough to manage the books at Stitch and Save, to follow complex sewing patterns, to keep track of household expenses to the penny. But she realized with a chill that Vanessa was constructing a narrative, one that painted Aurora as declining incompetent in need of supervision. And Nathan wasn't contradicting it. The isolation grew as spring progressed. Vanessa began hosting gatherings at the house book club meetings, dinner parties, playdates for Sophie without informing Aurora until guests were already arriving. "Oh, I must have forgotten to mention it," Vanessa would say with a practiced look of apology when Aurora emerged from her room to find strangers in her living room. "We're just having a few friends over." At these gatherings, Aurora was either ignored entirely or treated with the kind of exaggerated patience reserved for the very elderly or infirm. Women Vanessa's age would speak to her loudly and slowly, as if she were hard of hearing, or pat her hand condescendingly. "Your granddaughter tells me you used to be a seamstress," one woman said at a Saturday barbecue, the "used to be" erasing the fact that Aurora still worked 3 days a week at the alteration shop. "It's so nice they're taking care of you now," another commented, as if Aurora were an invalid rather than the homeowner hosting them all unwillingly. Worse were the conversations she overheard Vanessa referring to our house, Nathan discussing renovation plans as if he owned the property, both of them treating Aurora's presence as temporary, something to be tolerated until what? The question haunted her late at night, when the house finally grew quiet. One Tuesday in late April, Aurora arrived at Martha's for their weekly coffee to find her friend waiting with unusual seriousness. "I saw something yesterday that concerns me," Martha said, pouring coffee from a thermal carafe. "Nathan and Vanessa were at Portland City Bank. I was across the lobby depositing my pension check, and I overheard enough to gather they were discussing home equity loans." Aurora's hand trembled, coffee spilling into her saucer. "They already took out one loan without my permission. I think you need to protect yourself," Martha said firmly. "You need to check your documents, make sure they haven't taken anything else. And you need to talk to someone about your options." "What options?" Aurora asked, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "They're my family. I can't just throw them out." "Can't you?" "It's your house, Aurora. Your name on the deed. You worked your entire life for that home." "But Sophie..." Would be better off seeing her grandmother respected, not exploited, Martha finished. This isn't healthy for any of you, least of all that child. The harsh reality of Martha's words stayed with Aurora all day. That evening, determined to find her important papers, she waited until the house was quiet before slipping into the former master bedroom, now occupied by Nathan and Vanessa, to check the filing cabinet she'd been forced to leave behind in the move. The cabinet was locked, a new development. She tried the key she'd kept on her ring, but it no longer worked. They had changed the lock deliberately, barring her from her own documents. Fighting rising panic, Aurora searched the desk, the closet, anywhere. Her house deed insurance policies and banking information might be stored. She found nothing. A floorboard creaked behind her, and Aurora whirled to find Vanessa standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "Looking for something?" she asked, her voice deceptively light. "My papers," Aurora said, deciding directness was necessary. "My house deed insurance documents." "Oh, those—" Vanessa waved a hand. "Nathan put those somewhere safe. You know, at your age, it's easy to misplace important things." "They weren't misplaced. They were in my filing cabinet, which is now locked with a new key." Vanessa's expression hardened. "Aurora, it's late. You're obviously confused. Why don't you go back to bed and we can discuss this in the morning?" "I'm not confused," Aurora insisted, her voice rising. "I want my documents. Now." "Mom!" Nathan appeared behind Vanessa, his expression a mix of concern and annoyance. "What's going on?" "Your mother is having one of her episodes," Vanessa said before Aurora could respond. "She's looking for papers she probably misplaced months ago." "I didn't misplace anything," Aurora said, looking directly at her son. "I kept my house deed and other important documents in the filing cabinet. Now the lock's been changed, and I want to know why." Nathan's face revealed nothing. "For safekeeping, Mom. You've seemed a bit disorganized lately. We didn't want anything important getting lost." "I have never been disorganized a day in my life," Aurora said, her voice shaking with anger. "And those documents are mine. I have a right to them." "Of course you do," Nathan placated. "But it's after 11. Can't this wait until morning?" Aurora looked between them, her son and his wife united in this gaslighting effort, making her doubt her own mind, her own rights. She felt a moment of clarity pierce through her confusion and hurt. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was wrong. "Fine," she said, retreating toward the door. "We'll discuss it tomorrow." But she knew with a certainty that settled cold in her stomach that tomorrow would bring only more deflection, more subtle manipulation, more efforts to make her feel incompetent and dependent. Back in her small room, Aurora sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly to stop their trembling. The house had gone quiet again, but she felt no peace in the silence. Only dread. She had to find those documents. She had to protect herself. But how against her own family, against the people who should have been protecting her? Sleep eluded her that night, her mind racing with questions, fears, and a growing unwelcome suspicion that her son, the baby she had cradled, the boy she had raised, the man she had sacrificed for, was actively working against her interests, against her security, against her future. May arrived with a week of unseasonable heat, the thermometer climbing past 90 degrees 3 days in a row. Aurora's small bedroom, tucked at the back of the house with only one small window, became stifling despite the oscillating fan she'd purchased. The central air conditioning, a luxury Robert had insisted on installing during their last renovation, kept the main living areas cool. But Aurora found herself increasingly restricted from those spaces, especially when Vanessa's friends were over, which seemed to be almost daily now. "We're having a book club meeting," Vanessa would announce. "You might be more comfortable in your room, Aurora. We'll be discussing some mature themes." Or, "Sophie's having friends over for a movie night. It might get a bit loud in the living room if you were hoping to watch your programs." Each excuse was presented with a veneer of consideration that barely masked the underlying message: you are not welcome in your own home. Aurora had taken to spending more time at Martha's house or at the alteration shop picking up extra shifts, even when her arthritic fingers protested the additional strain. Anything to escape the suffocating feeling of being a stranger in her own home. But avoidance wasn't a solution. She knew that. The documents still hadn't been returned, despite her daily requests. Nathan always had an excuse: he was busy, he'd look for them later. He thought they might be at his office storage. "I need to see a copy of the home insurance policy," Aurora insisted one evening, catching Nathan alone in the kitchen. "The premium is due next month." Don't worry about that, Mom. I've taken care of it. What do you mean, taken care of it? That's my responsibility, my policy. Nathan's expression was a practiced blend of patience and condescension. I've switched us to a better plan. More comprehensive coverage, better rate. It made sense to consolidate with our auto insurance. Aurora stared at him. You changed my home insurance without consulting me. You can't do that. I'm the homeowner. A flash of something irritation, concern crossed Nathan's face before his expression smoothed again. Mom, it's all handled. You don't need to worry about these details anymore. That's why we're here. Remember, to help take these burdens off your shoulders. But they weren't burdens. They were responsibilities ones Aurora had managed capably for decades. The implication that she was no longer competent to handle her own affairs felt like a slap. The next morning, Aurora was sorting through the mail when an envelope caught her eye. It was from Portland City Bank, addressed to her, but marked Second Notice in red lettering. She opened it with trembling fingers, her breath catching as she read the contents. Dear Mrs. Thompson, this is a second notice regarding the missed payment on your personal loan of $5,000 opened on February 15th. Your payment of $127.50 was due on April 15th and remains outstanding. Aurora sank into a kitchen chair, the room spinning around her. This was the unauthorized home improvement loan for the patio, the one Nathan and Vanessa had taken out in her name. They had promised to make the payments. Clearly they hadn't. She was still sitting there, stunned, when Vanessa entered from the garden, her face flushed with exertion. The landscapers are doing a fantastic job on those new flower beds, she announced, pouring herself a glass of water before noticing Aurora's expression. What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. Wordlessly, Aurora held up the bank notice. Vanessa glanced at it, her expression unchanged. Oh, that. Don't worry about it. Nathan's handling the finances now. Not handling them very well, it seems, Aurora said, finding her voice. This payment is a month overdue. It's affecting my credit. Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. It's just a timing issue. He's consolidating some accounts. Without my knowledge or consent. Aurora stood, drawing herself up to her full height, which still left her several inches shorter than her daughter-in-law. This has to stop, Vanessa. The unauthorized charges, the loans, the changes to my insurance. It's my house, my finances, my life. Something hardened in Vanessa's gaze. Is it, though? How long do you really think you can manage on your own, Aurora? You're 64. You live alone. You have no one but us. The threat was thinly veiled, but unmistakable. Aurora felt a chill despite the room's warmth. I've managed just fine for the past 7 years, she said, keeping her voice steady. And I'm not alone. I have friends, colleagues. Aging neighbors and part-time co-workers, Vanessa corrected with a cruel smile. Not quite the support system you'll need when you can no longer care for yourself. Which, let's be honest, isn't that far off. Before Aurora could respond, the front door opened and Nathan called out, "Anyone home?" Vanessa's demeanor changed instantly, her face softening into a welcoming smile as she moved toward the entryway. In the kitchen, honey. Aurora remained standing, the bank notice clutched in her hand as Nathan entered. He kissed Vanessa briefly before noticing the tension in the room. Everything okay? Your mother found the loan notice, Vanessa said, her tone suggesting Aurora had been snooping rather than opening her own mail. Nathan sighed, setting down his laptop bag. Mom, I told you I'm handling the finances now. By missing payments on a loan I never authorized in the first place, Aurora demanded, holding up the notice. This is serious, Nathan. It's fraud, and it's damaging my credit score, which I've worked my entire life to maintain. Don't be dramatic, Nathan said, echoing Vanessa's dismissive tone. It's just a missed payment. I've been busy with job interviews. I'll take care of it tomorrow. That's not the point, Aurora insisted. The point is that you took out this loan without my permission. You've been making financial decisions that affect me without my knowledge. It has to stop. Nathan's expression darkened. Do you know how ungrateful you sound right now? After everything we've done for this house, the improvements, the modernization, I never asked for those things. I was happy with my home the way it was. Your home. Nathan's voice rose. This is our home now too, Mom. We live here. We take care of the place, take care of you. I don't need taking care of, Aurora said, her own voice rising to match his. What I need is respect. Respect for my property, my finances, my decisions. Nathan stepped closer, his face flushed with anger. Respect. How about some respect for everything we've done? We could have left you here alone getting older, letting this place fall apart around you. Instead, we moved in, improved the property value, made this house livable again. It was always livable, Aurora said, tears pricking at her eyes. It was always home. Vanessa interjected, her voice honey-sweet but eyes cold. Aurora, you're getting yourself worked up over nothing. Nathan said he'll handle the payment. Why don't you go lie down for a bit? You're looking flushed. The constant infantilization, being told to lie down, to calm down, to not worry about adult matters, pushed Aurora past her breaking point. Stop treating me like I'm senile, she shouted, slamming the letter down on the table. I am a grown woman in my own home, and I demand to be treated with respect. Nathan's eyes widened at her uncharacteristic outburst. Then his expression hardened. You want respect? Then act like someone who deserves it. Stop questioning every decision we make. Stop fighting us on the changes that need to happen. Stop being so damn stubborn about everything. Nathan, Vanessa cautioned, placing a hand on his arm. Your blood pressure. But he shook her off, stepping closer to Aurora, towering over her. This isn't just your house anymore, Mom. The sooner you accept that, the better for everyone. Aurora stood her ground, though her heart was racing. My name is on the deed. Mine alone. Not yours, not Vanessa's. And I want to see that deed along with all my other documents by the end of the day. A strange smile crossed Nathan's face. The deed? You think a piece of paper protects you? From what exactly? From family. From the people who will be taking care of you when you can't manage stairs anymore, when you can't remember to turn off the stove, when you need someone to drive you to doctor's appointments. The implications of his words, the future he was describing, the dependency he was counting on, sent a wave of cold fear through Aurora. This wasn't just about control of the house in the present. This was about something far more insidious. They were waiting for her to decline to become dependent, to have no choice but to surrender everything. I want my documents, she repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. Today. Or what? Nathan challenged. What exactly will you do? Mom, call the police on your own son, report us for trying to help you, for improving your house, for making sure your bills are paid, even if sometimes we're a little late. The question hung in the air, unanswered. What would she do? What could she do against her own family? Sophie's voice broke the tense silence as she entered from the hallway. Daddy, Grandma, why are you shouting? All three adults turned to see the 9-year-old standing uncertainly in the doorway, her school backpack still on. It's nothing, sweetheart, Vanessa said quickly, moving to usher the child toward her room. Grown-up discussion. Why don't you go start your homework? But Grandma looks upset, Sophie persisted, her eyes fixed on Aurora's face. Grandma is fine, Nathan said firmly. Just a little confused about some papers. Go on now, do as your mother says. As Sophie reluctantly retreated, throwing one last worried glance over her shoulder, Aurora felt something break inside her, the last tenuous thread of hope that this situation could resolve itself peacefully, that her family wasn't deliberately working against her interests. They were gaslighting her, isolating her, taking financial advantage of her, and now using veiled threats about her future care to maintain control. And they were doing it in front of Sophie, teaching the child that this was how you treated elderly family members. This isn't over, Aurora said quietly, gathering her dignity around her like armor. Not by a long shot. She retreated to her room, closing the door softly behind her. Leaning against it, she took several deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. The confrontation had been uglier than she'd anticipated, revealing the true nature of Nathan and Vanessa's intentions more clearly than any previous interaction. When her hands were steady enough, she reached for her phone and dialed Martha's number. I need your help, she said when her friend answered. And I think I need a lawyer. The June morning dawned clear in bright sunlight filtering through the small window of Aurora's back bedroom. She'd slept poorly, her mind replaying the previous day's confrontation. Since calling Martha, she'd been carefully considering her options, weighing the emotional cost of legal action against family, against the growing danger of doing nothing. She dressed with deliberate care, a blue blouse Robert had always loved, comfortable slacks, sensible shoes. Today, she would try one more time to reason with Nathan. One final attempt to salvage something from this deteriorating situation before taking more drastic measures. The house was quiet when she emerged from her room. Sophie had already left for school and Vanessa's car was gone from the driveway. A rare opportunity to speak with Nathan alone. She found him in the kitchen, coffee mug in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling absently. "Nathan," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We need to talk." He looked up, wariness immediately crossing his features. "Mom, if this is about yesterday, it's about everything," Aurora interrupted, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "This situation isn't working. Not for any of us." Nathan set his phone down with a sigh. "What exactly isn't working? The fact that we're making improvements to a house that was stuck in the 1990s. The fact that we're helping manage finances you were struggling with." "I wasn't struggling with anything," Aurora said, fighting to keep her voice calm. "I owned this house outright. I paid my bills on time. I had savings. Since you moved in, I've gone into debt, lost access to my own documents, and been relegated to the smallest bedroom in my own home." Nathan's jaw tightened. "We're family. We're supposed to share." "Sharing goes both ways," Aurora replied. "You've taken and taken, but what have you contributed? A fraction of the utilities, some half-hearted help around the house. Meanwhile, you and Vanessa have redecorated, remodeled, and refinanced, all without my consent." "We've been improving the property value," Nathan insisted. "Everything we've done benefits you in the long run." Aurora leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "I need my documents back. Today. The house deed, the insurance papers, my banking information. All of it." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, a hardening, a calculation. "Why, what are you planning?" "I'm not planning anything. They're my documents. I have a right to them." "Is this because of that missed loan payment? I told you I'd take care of it." His tone was dismissive, as if her concerns were trivial. Aurora took a deep breath. "It's because I need to protect myself and my interests, which clearly no one else in this house is doing." Nathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. "Protect yourself from what? From us, your family?" His voice rose with each question. "After everything we've done for you." "You haven't done anything for me," Aurora said, standing as well, unwilling to let him tower over her. "You've done things to me without my permission, against my wishes." "So ungrateful," Nathan muttered, pacing the kitchen. "We could have left you here alone, let you end up in some facility when you couldn't manage anymore." "I was managing perfectly well before you arrived," Aurora countered. "And I'd be managing perfectly well now if you'd just leave." The words hung in the air between them. She hadn't meant to say it so bluntly, but once spoken she couldn't take them back. Nathan froze, turning slowly to face her. "Leave? You want us to leave?" "I want my house back," Aurora said quietly. "I want my life back." For a moment, Nathan just stared at her, disbelief etched across his features. Then his expression transformed, darkening with a rage Aurora had never seen directed at her before. "Your house. Your life," he snarled, advancing toward her. "What about my life? What about Sophie's? You'd throw your own granddaughter out on the street." Aurora stood her ground, though her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. "Of course not. I'd never want to hurt Sophie, but this arrangement isn't working. We need to find another solution." "Another solution?" Nathan repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Like what? We can barely afford rent in this market. Where exactly do you expect us to go?" "That's not my problem to solve," Aurora said, immediately regretting the harshness of her words. "I mean, I'd help you find something. I'd contribute what I could." "Your money." Nathan laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "What money? Your little pension, your part-time sewing job, that wouldn't cover a security deposit in this city." "Then perhaps Vanessa's parents could help," Aurora suggested, stepping backward as Nathan continued to advance. "Or you could look outside Portland, where it's more affordable." "Leave Portland Sophie's school, her friends, all because you're too selfish to share this house that's too big for you anyway." Aurora's back hit the refrigerator. She was cornered now, with nowhere to retreat. "Nathan, please, step back. Let's discuss this calmly." "Calmly?" His face was inches from hers, now flushed with anger. "You want to throw us out of our home and you expect me to be calm?" "It's my home," Aurora insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is on the deed." "A piece of paper!" Nathan shouted, slamming his hand against the refrigerator beside her head. The force of it rattled the appliance magnets and Sophie's artwork cascading to the floor. "That's all that matters to you, isn't it? Some legal document, not your family, not your granddaughter, just your precious property rights." Aurora flinched but didn't back down. "It's not about the paper, it's about respect. It's about how you've treated me since moving in." "Treated you?" "We've taken care of you. We've modernized this dated house, managed your finances, included you in our family life. You've pushed me to the margins of my own home, Aurora corrected. You've taken over every space, every decision. You've made me feel like an unwelcome guest in the house I spent 40 years paying for. Something snapped in Nathan's eyes. With a sound of pure frustration, he shoved Aurora hard, sending her stumbling backward. Her head struck the corner of the kitchen cabinet with a sickening crack. White-hot pain exploded at the base of her skull. Aurora's vision swam dark spots dancing before her eyes as she slid to the floor. "Grandma?" Sophie's voice cut through the ringing in Aurora's ears. The child stood frozen in the doorway, backpack still on, eyes wide with horror. Aurora hadn't even heard her come in. School. It was a minimum day. She'd forgotten. "Sophie, go to your room." Nathan ordered, his voice strangled as he stared at Aurora crumpled on the floor. "You hurt Grandma?" the girl whispered, tears filling her eyes. "It was an accident," Nathan insisted. "Grandma fell. Go to your room now." Sophie didn't move, her gaze fixed on Aurora. Aurora touched the back of her head, fingers coming away wet with blood. The sight of it seemed to snap Nathan out of his rage. He took a step toward her, hand outstretched. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "Don't touch me," Aurora whispered, using the counter to pull herself unsteadily to her feet. The kitchen tilted sickeningly around her, but she forced herself to remain upright. "Don't come near me." The sound of the front door opening announced Vanessa's return. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene with a glance, Aurora bleeding, Nathan standing over her, Sophie crying. "What happened?" she asked, her voice unnaturally calm. "Daddy pushed Grandma," Sophie sobbed. "Her head is bleeding." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. "I'm sure it was an accident," she said smoothly, moving to place an arm around Sophie's shoulders. "Sometimes adults bump into each other. I bet Grandma lost her balance. She's been a bit unsteady lately, haven't you noticed?" The deliberate manipulation, the immediate attempt to rewrite what had just happened, sent a chill through Aurora that had nothing to do with her injury. "Sophie saw everything," she said quietly. "Don't lie to her." Vanessa's expression hardened momentarily before she turned a concerned face to her daughter. "Sophie, honey, go to your room for a bit while we help Grandma. She's a little confused right now." "I'm not confused," Aurora said firmly despite the pounding in her head. "Your father pushed me, Sophie. It wasn't an accident." Nathan made a strangled sound. "Mom, stop. You're scaring her." "She's already scared," Aurora replied. "And she should be. What happened here isn't normal. It isn't right." "Enough," Vanessa snapped, pushing Sophie gently toward the hallway. "Go, sweetheart. We need to talk to Grandma privately." This time Sophie went, throwing one last frightened glance over her shoulder before disappearing down the hall. As soon as she was gone, Vanessa's demeanor changed completely. "What did you do?" she hissed at Aurora. "What did you say to him?" Aurora stared at her in disbelief, hand still pressed to the wound on her head. "What did I do? He assaulted me." "Don't be dramatic," Vanessa scoffed. "You obviously fell. You've been unsteady for months now. We've all noticed it." "He pushed me," Aurora insisted, looking to Nathan. "Tell her the truth." Nathan wouldn't meet her eyes. "She was threatening to evict us," he said to Vanessa. "She wants us out, says the house is hers." "It is mine," Aurora said. "And after this, I want you both out. Today." Vanessa laughed, the sound brittle and cold. "You're in no position to make demands. Look at you, elderly, injured, confused. Who do you think people will believe, us or you?" The threat was clear. They would deny everything. They would paint her as senile, unstable, prone to falls. Her word against theirs, but not completely. "Sophie saw," Aurora reminded them. "She knows what happened." "She's 9, Vanessa said dismissively. She was upset, confused by what she saw. Children misinterpret things all the time. Aurora straightened, ignoring the wave of dizziness that followed. "I'm leaving," she announced. "I'll be back for my things later." "Leaving? Where exactly do you plan to go?" Nathan asked, sounding genuinely confused, as if he couldn't imagine she had anywhere else. "That's not your concern anymore," Aurora replied, edging toward the doorway, keeping her eyes on them both. She made her way to her bedroom, closing the door firmly behind her. Her hands shook as she pulled a canvas tote bag from beneath the bed, the same one she'd prepared the night before after her conversation with Martha. Inside were a change of clothes, her medications, toiletries, and the small amount of cash she'd managed to set aside without Nathan and Vanessa knowing. Most importantly, it contained copies of her house deed and other important documents that Martha had helped her obtain from the county records office. Not the originals those were still missing, but legal copies that would hold up in court if necessary. Aurora changed her blouse, the blue one now stained with blood at the collar. She dabbed at the wound on her head with a damp washcloth, wincing at the sting. It wasn't deep, but head wounds bled profusely. She would need to clean it properly later. Bag packed, she took a final look around the small room that had been her prison these past months. There wasn't much she cared to take. Most of her treasured possessions were either hidden away or already claimed by Vanessa's redecorating zeal. Aurora slipped out through the side door, avoiding the kitchen where she could still hear Nathan and Vanessa's hushed, urgent conversation. Her car keys were in her bag, one thing she'd made sure to keep control of, though Nathan had hinted more than once that at her age, she might want to consider giving up driving. Her old Camry sat in the driveway, partially blocked by Vanessa's SUV. For a moment, Aurora considered taking it, but knew that would give them more time to prepare to create their narrative about her mental state. Better to leave on foot, at least for now. The June sun beat down as she walked briskly away from the house, the bag over her shoulder growing heavier with each step. Her head throbbed and she felt lightheaded from the combined effects of the injury stress and heat. But she kept moving one foot in front of the other, not looking back. Martha's house was 5 blocks away, normally an easy walk, but today it felt like miles. By the time Aurora reached her friend's neat bungalow, sweat dampened her forehead and her vision was blurring at the edges. She knocked, leaning heavily against the doorframe. When Martha opened the door, her expression shifted from welcome to alarm in an instant. "Aurora, my God, what happened to you?" She ushered Aurora inside, supporting her elbow as she stumbled slightly. "Nathan?" Aurora managed her voice, sounding distant to her own ears. "He pushed me. My head hit the cabinet." Martha helped her to the sofa, gently easing her down. "You're bleeding. Let me get my first aid kit." As Martha bustled away, Aurora closed her eyes briefly, the room spinning even behind her eyelids. She hadn't allowed herself to process the reality of what had happened until this moment. Her son, her only child, had physically assaulted her, had caused her to bleed, had left her to collect her own blood-matted hair from the kitchen floor. Martha returned, sitting beside Aurora with a white plastic box emblazoned with a red cross. "Let me see," she said gently, turning Aurora's head to examine the wound. "It's not deep, but it bled quite a bit. Head wounds always do." She began cleaning it with antiseptic, her touch careful and practiced. "You might need stitches." "No hospital," Aurora said quickly. "They'll have to report it. There would be questions." "Isn't that the point?" Martha asked, pausing in her ministrations. "To document what he did to you." Aurora shook her head immediately, regretting the movement as pain lanced through her skull. "Not yet. I need to think to plan. If I go to the hospital now claiming domestic violence, they'll make me file a police report. Nathan and Vanessa will deny everything. They'll say I fell, that I'm confused, that I've been having episodes. It'll be their word against mine." "And the truth against their lies," Martha countered, applying a butterfly bandage to the cleaned wound. "The truth doesn't always win," Aurora said wearily. "Not without evidence witnesses. Sophie saw what happened, but she's a child. And they've already started working on her, telling her I fell, that I'm confused." Martha's expression hardened. "Those manipulative bastards." Aurora had never heard her proper schoolteacher friend use such language, but she couldn't disagree with the assessment. "I need to be strategic about this," she said. "If I'm going to get my house back, keep my independence, I can't just rush in." "You're staying here," Martha declared, packing away the first aid supplies. "For as long as you need. The guest room is made up." Tears welled in Aurora's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." Martha squeezed her hand. "That's what they were counting on, that you'd have nowhere, no one. But they were wrong." Aurora spent 3 days in Martha's guest room, alternating between sleep and tearful wakefulness. The physical wound began healing, but the emotional damage felt raw and unrelenting. Her son had assaulted her, had driven her from her own home. What kind of mother raised a child who could do such a thing? On the 4th morning, she woke to find Martha sitting at the kitchen table with a woman Aurora didn't recognize, a striking African-American woman in her early 50s, with close-cropped silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. Aurora, this is Catherine Lawson, Martha said as Aurora paused in the doorway. She's an attorney who specializes in elder law and abuse cases. I've asked her to help us. Aurora self-consciously touched the bandage at the back of her head. I'm not sure I'm ready for a lawyer yet. Catherine Kate, as she insisted on being called, gestured to the empty chair across from her. Just talk to me, Mrs. Thompson. No commitment necessary today. Something about the woman's direct gaze and calm confidence made Aurora comply. She sat accepting the cup of tea Martha placed before her. Martha has told me the basics, Kate said, opening a sleek leather portfolio, but I'd like to hear it from you in your own words. So Aurora told her everything, the gradual invasion, the financial manipulation, the social isolation, culminating in the physical assault that had driven her from her home. Kate listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When Aurora finished, the lawyer sat back, tapping her pen thoughtfully against her notepad. This is a clear case of elder abuse, she said finally. Financial exploitation, psychological abuse, and physical assault. The fact that it's your son complicates matters emotionally but not legally. What are my options? Aurora asked, hands wrapped tightly around her teacup. We could pursue criminal charges for the assault, Kate began. But as you've already pointed out, without medical documentation or independent witnesses, it would be a difficult case to win. Sophie saw it happen, Aurora said quietly. Kate nodded. Children can be witnesses, but the courts are cautious about putting them in the middle of family disputes, and your son and daughter-in-law would likely claim she misinterpreted what she saw. So there's nothing I can do? The thought made Aurora's chest constrict painfully. I didn't say that, Kate corrected with a small smile. Criminal charges might be challenging, but civil remedies are absolutely on the table. You're the sole owner of the house, correct? Aurora nodded. Yes, it's fully paid off. Robert and I made the final mortgage payment 5 years ago before he passed. Then we can file for an emergency eviction order, Kate explained. Based on the unauthorized loans, financial exploitation, and the assault, we have grounds to request they be removed from your property immediately. Hope flickered dimly in Aurora's chest. How long would that take? Normally several weeks, Kate admitted. The courts move slowly even in emergency situations. But there's something working in our favor. They've taken out loans in your name without authorization. That's fraud, and it significantly strengthens our case. Martha, who had been silent during this exchange, spoke up. What about Sophie? She's caught in the middle of all this. Kate's expression softened. The court will consider the child's best interests. If there's evidence of an unstable or violent home environment, that will factor into any decisions. Aurora twisted the wedding ring she still wore. I don't want to hurt Sophie. She's innocent in all this. The best thing you can do for your granddaughter is to establish a safe, stable environment, Kate said gently. If that means removing her father from a situation where he's demonstrated violent behavior that's not hurting her, it's protecting her. The three women spent the next hour outlining a strategy. Kate would file for an emergency eviction order while simultaneously reporting the financial fraud to the appropriate authorities. In the meantime, Aurora would stay with Martha, documenting any further attempts by Nathan or Vanessa to access her finances or property. They still have my documents, Aurora reminded them. The original deed, my banking information, everything. We can get copies of most of those, Kate assured her. And we'll include the theft of your personal papers in our filing. It adds to the pattern of controlling behavior. As Kate prepared to leave, she paused, her expression serious. Mrs. Thompson, I want to be clear about something. This won't be easy. They'll fight back. They'll likely say terrible things about you, that you're confused, incompetent, even dangerous to yourself. Are you prepared for that? Aurora thought of Nathan's face, twisted with rage, of Vanessa's cold calculations of how quickly they'd begun gaslighting Sophie about what she'd witnessed. They're already saying those things, she said quietly. At least now I'll have someone believing me. After Kate left, Martha made them lunch simple egg salad sandwiches that Aurora could barely taste. Her mind kept replaying Kate's warnings, imagining the coming legal battle. Are you sure I'm doing the right thing? She asked Martha as they cleared the dishes. Martha's response was immediate. Yes, absolutely yes. What they've done to you is wrong, Aurora. It's criminal. And if you don't stand up for yourself now, it will only get worse. Aurora sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I keep thinking about Sophie. She must be so confused, so frightened. All the more reason to get this resolved quickly, Martha said firmly. That child needs stability, not to be living in a home where her father assaults her grandmother. Aurora nodded, but the weight of it all pressed down on her, the betrayal, the uncertain future, the pain of confronting her own child in court. What would Robert say if he could see them now? The family he'd loved fractured beyond recognition. Her cell phone, which had been mercifully silent for days, suddenly buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Grandma. It's Sophie. I'm using my friend's phone. Are you okay? When are you coming home? Aurora's throat tightened as she typed back. I'm fine, sweetheart. Staying with a friend for a while. I love you very much. The response came quickly. Dad says you're confused and needed time away. But I saw what happened. I'm scared, Grandma. Tears blurred Aurora's vision. I know, sweetheart. I'm working to fix things. Be brave. I love you. I love you too. Dad's calling. I have to go. Aurora set the phone down, her hands shaking. They're already poisoning her mind, Martha, making her doubt what she saw with her own eyes. Martha's expression hardened. All the more reason to fight this with everything you've got. A week passed in a blur of legal consultations, document gathering, and anxious waiting. Kate had filed the initial paperwork for the emergency eviction, but warned it could be days or even weeks before they received a response. In the meantime, Aurora had changed her bank accounts, reported the fraudulent loan, and placed a freeze on her credit to prevent further unauthorized activity. She'd also started seeing a counselor Kate had recommended, Dr. Rivera, who specialized in helping elderly victims of family abuse. The sessions were painful, but necessary, forcing Aurora to confront the patterns that had led to this crisis. You've spent a lifetime putting others first, Dr. Rivera observed during their second meeting. Particularly your son. That created a dynamic where he came to expect your sacrifice as his due. The words stung with their accuracy. Aurora had always prided herself on her selflessness, her willingness to give Nathan everything, even when it meant giving up her own needs, her own space, her own dignity. She was beginning to understand how that pattern had contributed to the current situation. On the 9th day of her self-imposed exile, Aurora was sitting in Martha's garden, enjoying the June sunshine while her friend watered the roses when Martha's phone rang. It's my niece, Martha said, glancing at the screen before answering. Hello, Becky. What's up? Aurora watched as Martha's expression shifted from casual interest to concern, then outright anger. You're kidding me, she said into the phone. Right now, how many people I see? Yes, she's right here. Hold on. Martha lowered the phone, her face grim. Aurora, there's something you need to know. Becky lives 2 doors down from your house. She says Nathan and Vanessa are having some kind of party. A big one from the looks of it. Barbecue music, lots of cars parked along the street. Aurora frowned. A party while I'm gone. Not just a party, Martha said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Becky overheard Vanessa telling someone they were celebrating. Celebrating what? Your departure, Martha said bluntly. According to what Becky heard, they're telling people you've moved out permanently, that the house is theirs now. The words hit Aurora like a physical blow. She'd expected anger from Nathan, perhaps even retaliation of some kind. But to celebrate her absence, to act as if they'd won, as if they'd successfully driven her from her own home. Becky took pictures, Martha said, holding out the phone. She thought we should see. Aurora's hand trembled as she accepted the device. On the screen was her backyard, her carefully tended garden now sporting a large patio where her vegetable beds once stood. People milled about with drinks in hand, a large grill smoking at one end. Vanessa stood in the center of it all, raising a glass and a toast, her face alight with triumph. Aurora swiped to the next photo. Nathan at the grill laughing with men Aurora didn't recognize. Another swipe, Sophie sitting alone on the edge of the new patio, looking small and lost amid the adult revelry. I want to see, Aurora said, suddenly returning the phone to Martha. In person. Martha's eyebrows shot up. You want to go to the house now, is that wise? I won't go in, Aurora promised. I just need to see for myself, to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Martha hesitated, then nodded. All right, but I'm driving and we're staying in the car. 20 minutes later, Martha's Subaru cruised slowly past Aurora's house. Even from the street, the party was obvious. Cars lined the curb. Music drifted from the backyard, laughter and conversation carried on the afternoon air. Aurora sank low in the passenger seat, not wanting to be recognized by any of the guests. Martha pulled over half a block down, positioning the car so they had a clear view of the driveway and front yard. "Look at them," Martha muttered as more guests arrived bearing wine bottles and covered dishes. "Acting like they own the place." Aurora didn't respond. Her attention caught by something else, a banner hanging from the front porch, partially visible from their vantage point. She couldn't read it all, but the words, "New Beginning," were clear enough. Just then, the front door opened and Vanessa emerged to greet the newcomers. Her voice carried across the quiet street, clear and jubilant. "Welcome. Come around back, everyone's there. We're celebrating our good fortune, finally having the house to ourselves." The newcomers laughed, following Vanessa around the side of the house to the backyard festivities. Aurora's hands clenched in her lap nails, digging painfully into her palms. "They planned this," she whispered. "All along they planned to get rid of me somehow, to take my house." Martha reached over, covering Aurora's clenched hands with her own. "And now we have proof," she said firmly. "Proof of their intentions, their celebration of your distress." Aurora nodded slowly, a strange calm settling over her. The shock and pain were still there, but beneath them something new was forming, a steely resolve, a certainty that she would not allow this injustice to stand. "Let's go," she said quietly. "I've seen enough." As Martha drove away, Aurora didn't look back. She was done looking back, done wondering where she'd gone wrong, done blaming herself for Nathan's choices. It was time to look forward to fight for what was rightfully hers. When they returned to Martha's house, Aurora went straight to her phone, calling Kate. "They're having a party at my house," she said without preamble when the lawyer answered. "Celebrating that I'm gone, telling people the house is theirs now." "That's actually helpful for us," Kate said after a moment. "It demonstrates their intent quite clearly. Martha's niece took photos you said, can you have her send those to me?" "Already done," Martha called from across the room, holding up her phone. "Good," Kate said. "I'll add this to our filing. The judge needs to see exactly what we're dealing with here." After hanging up, Aurora sat on Martha's sofa, emotions churning. The image of Sophie's small figure isolated amid the celebrating adults haunted her. The child was caught in the middle of an ugly situation, witnessing behaviors that no 9-year-old should have to understand. "She looks so lonely," Aurora murmured more to herself than Martha. Martha sat beside her, understanding immediately whom she meant. "She is. Children always are when adults fail them." "I'm not failing her," Aurora said with sudden fierceness. "I'm fighting for her, too. For the kind of home she deserves, one without lies, without manipulation, without violence." Martha nodded, squeezing Aurora's hand. "Yes, and that's the difference between you and them. They're celebrating what they've taken. You're fighting for what you can give." That night, Aurora slept soundly for the first time since leaving her house. The pain was still there, the betrayal still sharp, but purpose had replaced paralysis. Tomorrow she would continue gathering evidence. Tomorrow she would prepare for the legal battle ahead. Tomorrow she would take one more step toward reclaiming what was hers, not just the house, but her dignity, her independence, her future. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to show Sophie what real strength looked like. July in Portland brought sweltering heat unusual for the typically mild Pacific Northwest summer. Aurora sat in the courthouse waiting room, her lightweight linen dress doing little to ease her discomfort. The air conditioning struggled against both the weather and the press of anxious bodies filling the space. People waiting for divorces, restraining orders, custody decisions, all the messy fragments of broken relationships. Martha sat beside her, a solid presence in a navy pantsuit that somehow resisted the wilting effect of the heat. On Aurora's other side, Kate shuffled through documents in a sleek leather portfolio, occasionally making notes with a silver pen. "The case before ours is wrapping up," Kate said, glancing at her watch. "We'll be called in soon. Remember what we discussed, answer only what's asked, stick to facts, don't let emotion overwhelm you, even if Nathan's attorney tries to provoke it." Aurora nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. She'd chosen her outfit carefully conservative, but not matronly neat, but not overly formal. Kate had advised her to present herself as exactly what she was, a capable, independent woman in her 60s, not the confused, declining elder that Nathan and Vanessa were attempting to portray. "Is Nathan here?" she asked, glancing around the crowded room. She hadn't seen her son since the day of the assault nearly a month ago now. "His attorney is," Kate confirmed, nodding toward a man in an expensive suit standing near the water fountain. "That's Bradley Wilson. corporate attorney partner at Vanessa's brother's firm, not typically a family law practitioner, which works in our favor. The courtroom doors opened and a bailiff emerged. Thompson versus Thompson, Judge Rivera presiding. Aurora's stomach clenched. Here it was the culmination of weeks of preparation, of gathering evidence, of steeling herself against the inevitable pain of publicly confronting her own child. Kate gathered her materials. "Ready?" Aurora stood, drawing strength from Martha's encouraging nod. "As I'll ever be." The courtroom was smaller than Aurora had imagined, intimate almost, with rich wooden panels and the state flag hanging beside the judge's bench. Judge Rivera, a woman perhaps a decade younger than Aurora, with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, glanced up as they entered. And there, already seated at the respondents' table, were Nathan and Vanessa. Nathan looked thinner than Aurora remembered, his face drawn dark circles under his eyes. Vanessa, in contrast, appeared polished and confident in a conservative blouse and skirt, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Nathan's gaze met Aurora's briefly before skittering away. Something twisted in her chest. Grief, anger, love, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't unravel. This was her son, her only child, the baby she had nursed, and the boy she had raised. How had they arrived at this terrible place? "All parties are present," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Maria Rivera, presiding in the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, case number 2023 CV 4872. Judge Rivera surveyed the courtroom. "This is a hearing on an emergency motion for eviction based on claims of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and assault. Is the petitioner prepared to proceed?" Kate rose. "Yes, Your Honor. Catherine Lawson, representing Aurora Thompson." "And for the respondents?" The expensive suit, Bradley Wilson, stood. "Bradley Wilson for Nathan Thompson and Vanessa Thompson, Your Honor. We'd like to note for the record that this entire proceeding is unnecessary. Mrs. Thompson is welcome in her home at any time. She left voluntarily and has chosen not to return." Kate's expression remained impassive, but Aurora saw her hand tighten slightly on her pen. "Save your arguments for the appropriate time, Mr. Wilson," Judge Rivera said mildly. "Ms. Lawson, you may present your case." What followed was a methodical presentation of evidence that shocked Aurora, despite having lived through it. Kate outlined the pattern of escalating control, the bedroom takeover, the financial exploitation, the social isolation building toward the physical assault that had driven Aurora from her home. Bank statements showing unauthorized loans and charges. Photographs of Aurora's injury, the blood-stained blouse, preserved as evidence. Martha's testimony about Aurora's arrival at her door, disoriented and bleeding. Most damning were the photographs from the party displayed on a monitor for the judge to see. Vanessa raising a glass, the banner declaring "New Beginnings," the patio built without permission on Aurora's property. They weren't just taking advantage of Mrs. Thompson's generosity, Your Honor, Kate concluded. They were systematically working to dispossess her of her home and assets. The assault was simply the culmination of a months-long campaign of elder abuse. When Wilson rose for the defense, his strategy became immediately clear. "Your Honor, this case is a sad example of age-related cognitive decline being exploited by those who would separate a vulnerable elder from her family," he began smoothly. "Mrs. Thompson has become increasingly confused in recent months. She misplaces items, forgets conversations, becomes agitated over minor changes to routines." Aurora felt her cheeks flush with indignation. She opened her mouth to object, but Kate placed a warning hand on her arm. "My clients moved into Mrs. Thompson's home at her request to provide care and companionship as her capabilities declined," Wilson continued. "The loans and purchases were made with her full knowledge and consent, though she may not remember those conversations now. The so-called assault was simply an unfortunate accident, Mrs. Thompson lost her balance, as she frequently does, and injured herself on a cabinet." The portrayal was so contrary to reality that Aurora could barely contain her outrage. They were painting her as senile, incompetent, imagining slights that didn't exist. "As for the party," Wilson said with a dismissive wave, "it was simply a neighborhood gathering. Mrs. Thompson's neighbor misinterpreted casual conversation. My clients have been desperately worried about Mrs. Thompson since she wandered away from home. They want nothing more than for her to return to the loving, supportive environment they've created." "Wandered away?" Aurora whispered incredulously to Kate. "I left because Nathan assaulted me." "I know," Kate murmured back. "Let him dig his hole deeper." When Wilson finished, Judge Rivera removed her glasses, massaging the bridge of her nose briefly. "I'd like to hear from the parties directly. she said. "Mrs. Thompson, would you take the stand, please?" Aurora moved to the witness box, feeling oddly calm despite the circumstances. She'd rehearsed this with Kate, knowing how important her testimony would be. After being sworn in, Aurora faced the judge directly. "Mrs. Thompson," Judge Rivera began, "in your own words, tell me why you believe an emergency eviction is necessary." Aurora took a deep breath. "My son and his wife moved into my home ostensibly for a few months while they saved for their own place. Instead, they systematically took control of my house, relegating me to the smallest bedroom, making financial decisions, without my consent, isolating me from friends and even my granddaughter. When I finally confronted Nathan about this behavior, he became violent. He shoved me, causing my head to strike a cabinet. And you believe this was intentional, not an accident, as Mr. Wilson suggests?" "It was absolutely intentional," Aurora said firmly. "My granddaughter witnessed it." Afterward, Nathan and Vanessa immediately began telling Sophie I had fallen, that I was confused. They began constructing a narrative of my mental decline to cover their actions. Judge Rivera nodded thoughtfully. "Why did you leave the house rather than calling police immediately?" "I was afraid," Aurora admitted. "Afraid they wouldn't believe me over my son and daughter-in-law. Afraid of what it would do to Sophie to see her father arrested. I needed time to think, to get help, to understand my options." "And now what do you want from these proceedings?" Aurora sat straighter. "I want my house back, Your Honor. The home I worked for 40 years to pay off. The home where I raised my son, where I nursed my husband through his final illness. I want the financial exploitation to stop. I want to feel safe in my own space again." When Nathan took the stand next, Aurora was struck by how rehearsed he seemed, how carefully he chose his words. "Mom has been struggling for a while now," he said, his voice thick with manufactured concern. "Forgetting appointments, misplacing things, becoming paranoid about minor household changes. We've been trying to help to make the house safer and more comfortable for all of us, but she resists everything." "Did you push your mother on June 12th of this year?" Judge Rivera asked directly. Nathan hesitated just long enough to be noticeable. "No, Your Honor. Mom lost her balance during an argument. I tried to catch her, but she fell and hit her head on the cabinet." "An argument about what?" Another hesitation. "About household arrangements. Mom was confused about some financial matters, agitated. We were trying to calm her down." "And the party documented in these photographs." Judge Rivera gestured to the monitor where an image of Vanessa raising a glass still displayed. "What was the purpose of this gathering?" "Just a summer barbecue," Nathan said smoothly. "Neighbors, friends from Sophie's school. Nothing special." "The banner says New Beginnings," Judge Rivera observed. "What beginning were you celebrating?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Just summer. New season, new opportunities." Vanessa's testimony followed the same script. Aurora was declining mentally, had become paranoid, had misinterpreted innocent actions as threatening. The party was just a casual gathering, not a celebration of Aurora's absence. As the testimony concluded, Judge Rivera called for a brief recess to review the evidence. Aurora sat quietly watching Nathan and Vanessa huddled with their attorney across the courtroom, occasionally glancing in her direction. "They're lying so smoothly," she whispered to Kate. "What if the judge believes them?" "The evidence doesn't support their version," Kate assured her. "And they've made a critical mistake. If you're as mentally compromised as they claim, why didn't they report you missing when you wandered away? No police report, no missing persons filing, no wellness checks. Instead, they threw a party." When court resumed, Judge Rivera seemed to have reached a decision quickly. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented, I find sufficient cause for concern regarding elder abuse, financial exploitation, and assault," she began. "The unauthorized loans in Mrs. Thompson's name are particularly troubling, as are the photographs of what clearly appears to be a celebration of her absence." Aurora felt her breath catch. "Therefore, I am granting the emergency eviction order. Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Thompson are to vacate the property at 1742 Laurel Avenue within 72 hours. They may remove personal belongings, only no furniture or fixtures that were present in the home prior to their occupancy. A sheriff's deputy will oversee the removal to ensure compliance." Nathan's face darkened with anger. Vanessa placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering urgently. "Additionally," Judge Rivera continued, "I am issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting Mr. and Mrs. Thompson from contacting Mrs. Aurora Thompson except through counsel. This order excludes minor child Sophie Thompson, for whom supervised visitation with her grandmother may be arranged through family services. The judge looked directly at Nathan and Vanessa. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges related to the unauthorized loans and financial transactions. This court takes elder abuse very seriously, Mr. Thompson. With a final tap of her gavel, it was over. Aurora had won at least this first crucial battle. Her house would be returned to her. Nathan and Vanessa would be removed. The financial exploitation would stop. So why did victory taste so bitter on her tongue? 3 days later, Aurora stood on the sidewalk before her house keys clutched tightly in her hand. Behind her, Martha waited in her Subaru, ready to help bring in the few possessions Aurora had taken when she fled. Beside her stood Officer Ramirez, a Portland police officer assigned to oversee the eviction and ensure Aurora's safe return to her property. "They should be gone by now, ma'am," Officer Ramirez said gently. "The sheriff's department confirmed they vacated yesterday afternoon." Aurora nodded, unable to form words past the lump in her throat. After everything that had happened, after the legal victory and vindication, she had expected to feel triumphant returning to her home. Instead, she felt only a profound sadness for what had been lost, for the family bonds broken, for the pain inflicted on all sides. "Would you like me to go in first?" Officer Ramirez offered, sensing her hesitation. "No," Aurora said, squaring her shoulders. "This is my home. I'll go first." The key turned smoothly in the lock, the door swinging open to reveal the entryway beyond. Aurora stepped inside, immediately assaulted by the unfamiliar scent of chemical cleaners and artificial air fresheners, Vanessa's preferences, not her own. The house felt both familiar and foreign simultaneously. The basic structure remained the hardwood floors Robert had refinished 30 years ago, the archway leading to the living room, the staircase with its sturdy oak banister. But almost everything else had changed. The walls, once a warm, buttery yellow that caught the morning light, had been painted a stark, trendy gray. The comfortable, if worn, furnishings had been replaced with sleek, modern pieces that looked like they belonged in a catalog, not a home. Family photographs that had lined the hallway were gone, replaced by generic abstract prints in minimalist frames. "Oh, Aurora," Martha breathed, entering behind her. "What have they done to the place?" Officer Ramirez moved efficiently through the rooms, confirming the house was indeed empty of occupants. Aurora followed in a daze, cataloging each unwelcome change, each erasure of her history. The kitchen had been completely renovated, new cabinets, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. Gone was the vintage Formica table where she and Robert had shared morning coffee for decades, replaced by a cold glass and metal breakfast bar. Her garden, visible through the kitchen window, had been almost entirely paved over to create the party patio. Only a small strip of earth remained along the fence the rose bushes Robert had planted on their 10th anniversary, now withered from neglect. "The master bedroom seems mostly untouched," Officer Ramirez reported, returning from her inspection. "Though there's some damage to the walls, looks like pictures were removed rather carelessly." Aurora nodded dully. The physical changes were shocking, but not as painful as the deeper violation she felt, the systematic attempt to erase her presence, her history, her very existence in this space. "The house is secure, Mrs. Thompson," Officer Ramirez said, completing her checklist. "Is there anything else you need before I go?" "No, thank you," Aurora managed. "You've been very kind." After the officer left, Martha put an arm around Aurora's shoulders. "It's still your house," she said firmly. "The bones are the same, even if they tried to change the face of it." Aurora nodded, moving to the living room window. She pushed aside unfamiliar curtains to look out at the street where she'd lived for 40 years. Nothing out there had changed: the same oak trees, the same cracked sidewalk, the same neighbors' houses. Only her home, her sanctuary, had been transformed. "They left some things in Sophie's room," Martha reported, returning from upstairs. "Clothes, books, toys. They must be planning to collect them later." "Sophie," Aurora murmured. In the turmoil of reclaiming her house, she'd had little time to think about what would happen with her granddaughter. Judge Rivera had mentioned supervised visitation, but the details remained to be worked out. Would Sophie blame her for evicting her parents? Would the child understand any of what had happened? A sudden crash from the kitchen startled them both. Aurora rushed in to find a ceramic vase shattered on the floor, knocked from its precarious perch on the edge of the counter by the breeze through the open window. As she knelt to gather the broken pieces, she noticed something: the vase wasn't hers. It was one of Vanessa's decorative touches left behind in their hasty departure. Somehow this small discovery broke the emotional paralysis that had gripped her since entering the house. This wasn't her home, not anymore. They had taken that from her as surely as if they'd burned the place to the ground. What remained was a shell filled with someone else's taste, someone else's vision. But as Martha helped her sweep up the broken ceramic, a new thought emerged. If this wasn't her home anymore, she could make it so again. She could reclaim not just the legal right to the property, but its soul, its character, the comfort it had once provided. "I need to change the locks," Aurora said suddenly, surprising herself with the decisiveness in her voice. "And then I need to start putting things right." Martha smiled, recognizing the spark of determination that had been missing since Aurora first fled her home. "I know a good locksmith, and I'm pretty handy with a paintbrush if you're thinking what I think you're thinking." For the first time in weeks, Aurora felt a genuine smile tug at her lips. "I'm thinking it's time to bring this house back to life my way." The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Aurora hired a locksmith to change every exterior door lock. She enlisted Martha and 2 other friends from her sewing circle to help repaint the living room and kitchen, restoring the warm yellow tones she'd always loved. She called a junk removal service to haul away the sleek, uncomfortable furniture Vanessa had acquired, replacing it with comfortable if slightly worn pieces from secondhand stores and estate sales. She couldn't afford to redo the kitchen renovation or tear out the backyard patio. Those changes would have to remain for now, reminders of the invasion she'd endured. But she planted new vegetable beds in the remaining garden space and hung colorful bird feeders from the patio cover, small acts of reclamation. Each night, exhausted from the day's work, she slept in the master bedroom, her bedroom surrounded by familiar linens she'd retrieved from storage, the mattress still bearing the slight indentation where Robert had slept for so many years. In quiet moments, she worried about Sophie missed her with an ache that felt physical. Kate had arranged for a supervised visit the following weekend, but Aurora fretted over how the child would react, what Nathan and Vanessa might have told her. The financial aftermath of Nathan and Vanessa's occupation remained to be sorted out. Kate was working with the bank to remove the fraudulent loans from Aurora's credit and with the district attorney's office regarding potential criminal charges for the financial exploitation. Aurora had mixed feelings about pressing charges against her own son, but Kate insisted they needed to proceed to protect Aurora's financial future. "The damage they've done to your credit score alone could take years to repair," Kate explained during a check-in meeting. "And there may be other accounts we haven't discovered yet." On a rainy Thursday afternoon, as Aurora sorted through a box of family photographs she'd found stashed in the attic, the doorbell rang. She approached cautiously, peering through the newly installed security peephole. A woman in her late 30s stood on the porch, professional in appearance, holding a portfolio similar to Kate's. Not Nathan or Vanessa, then Aurora had feared they might try to visit despite the restraining order. "Mrs. Thompson," the woman asked when Aurora opened the door. "I'm Diane Winters from Child Protective Services. I was hoping we could talk about your granddaughter, Sophie." Aurora's heart lurched. "Is she all right? Has something happened?" "She's physically fine," Ms. Winters assured her, stepping inside at Aurora's gesture. "But we're concerned about her emotional well-being. May we sit down?" In the newly repainted living room, Ms. Winters explained the situation. Sophie's teacher reported concerning behaviors at summer school, withdrawal anxiety, emotional outbursts. When the school counselor spoke with her, Sophie mentioned witnessing violence between you and her father. Aurora winced. "He pushed me. My head hit a cabinet. Sophie saw it happen." Ms. Winters nodded. "That's consistent with what Sophie described. She also mentioned tension in her current living situation, an extended stay hotel where she's sharing a room with both parents. She expressed worry about you and asked repeatedly when she could see you again." "We have a supervised visit scheduled this weekend," Aurora said. "The court arranged it." "Yes, I'm aware of the court order." Ms. Winters hesitated. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to be direct with you. We're assessing whether Sophie's current living arrangement is in her best interest. The combination of witnessed violence, unstable housing, and the emotional tension between her parents is concerning." Aurora leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're exploring alternatives. Given that you're Sophie's closest relative and have been a significant presence in her life, we wanted to assess whether you might be a placement option temporarily, at least, while her parents stabilize their situation." The possibility stole Aurora's breath. Sophie here with her, away from the tension and instability of hotel living with parents in crisis. I would do anything for that child, Aurora said firmly. Anything to keep her safe and happy. Ms. Winters smiled slightly. I can see that, which is why I'd like to conduct a home evaluation today if you're amenable. We would need to ensure the environment is safe and appropriate for a 9-year-old girl. For the next hour, Ms. Winters toured the house, making notes on a tablet. She examined Aurora's newly reclaimed master bedroom, the small room that had been Aurora's prison and would now become a proper guest room, and Sophie's room still partially filled with the child's belongings. You've been making quite a few changes, Ms. Winters observed as they returned to the living room. Reclaiming my space, Aurora explained. My son and his wife made substantial alterations without my consent. I'm trying to make it feel like home again. Ms. Winters nodded thoughtfully. And financially, the court records indicate there were some concerns about exploitation. Would you be able to support Sophie if she were placed with you? I have my pension from Riverside Textiles, my Social Security and income from part-time work at an alteration shop, Aurora explained. It was enough to maintain this house and meet my needs before Nathan and Vanessa drained my savings. With careful budgeting, it would be enough for Sophie and me. As busy. Winters prepared to leave, she paused in the doorway. This isn't a done deal, Mrs. Thompson. We'll need to conduct further assessments, interview Sophie, possibly arrange a home visit with her present. But based on what I've seen today and the court's findings regarding your situation, I'm inclined to recommend you as a temporary placement option. Hope bloomed in Aurora's chest, tempered by sadness that it had come to this, that Nathan and Vanessa's actions had created such instability for their daughter that authorities were considering removing her from their care. Whatever happens, Aurora said, please make sure Sophie knows I love her, that none of this is her fault. Ms. Winters' expression softened. Children are remarkably resilient, Mrs. Thompson, especially when they have at least one stable adult they can trust. It seems Sophie has that in you. After the social worker left, Aurora sat in her newly arranged living room, surrounded by the familiar photographs she'd rescued from the attic, thinking about what a new beginning with Sophie might look like. Not a celebration of driving someone away as Nathan and Vanessa had done, but a joining together, a healing, a chance to provide the stability a child deserved. Whatever came next, Aurora knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was done being a victim. From now on, she would be a protector of herself, of Sophie, of the home she had rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. By August, a new rhythm had established itself in Aurora's life and home. The supervised visits with Sophie had progressed to overnight stays every other weekend. The child had flourished in the stable environment Aurora provided, slowly regaining her natural exuberance after the trauma of recent months. Aurora had returned to work at Stitch and Save, her skilled fingers still capable of the delicate alterations that brought in supplemental income. Her co-workers had welcomed her back with concern and support, creating a protective circle that helped Aurora reconnect with the community. The district attorney had decided to pursue charges against Nathan for the financial fraud, but not for the assault, citing insufficient evidence beyond Aurora's testimony. She had mixed feelings about this decision, relief that Nathan wouldn't face assault charges, but concern that without this consequence, he might never fully acknowledge what he had done. On a warm Saturday morning, Aurora sat on her restored front porch swing, watching Sophie ride her bicycle up and down the sidewalk. The child's dark hair streamed behind her face, alight with the simple joy of movement and freedom. Martha joined Aurora on the swing, handing her a glass of iced tea. She looks happy, Martha observed. More like herself. Aurora nodded, smiling as Sophie executed a wobbly turn at the end of the block. The nightmares have stopped. She's sleeping through the night now. And how about you? Are you sleeping? Aurora considered the question. Sleep had been elusive in the weeks following her return home, her mind replaying the confrontation with Nathan, imagining what might have happened if she hadn't escaped when she did. But gradually, as she reclaimed her space and reestablished her independence, the anxiety had eased. Better, she acknowledged. I still have moments. When I hear a noise at night, or when the mail comes and I worry about finding another bill I didn't authorize. But it's getting better. Martha nodded understanding without need for elaboration. She had been Aurora's rock through the entire ordeal, offering shelter when Aurora fled, standing beside her in court, helping restore the house to a home. Their friendship had deepened through crisis, becoming something akin to sisterhood. Dr. Rivera says it's normal, Aurora continued, referring to her therapist. The hypervigilance, the moments of fear. It's part of recovering from trauma. Trauma, Martha repeated softly. It's still hard to believe Nathan could do this to you. The little boy who used to bring you dandelion bouquets. Aurora sighed, watching Sophie pedal past again, waving enthusiastically. She waved back, her heart full. I've been thinking about that a lot, about when it all started to go wrong. With Nathan or with the situation here? With Nathan, Dr. Rivera has helped me see patterns I missed, or maybe ignored. Aurora took a sip of tea, gathering her thoughts. Robert was hard on him, expected so much. Nathan was sensitive, artistic, not the rough-and-tumble son Robert had imagined. Martha nodded. I remember Robert pushing him into sports when the boy clearly preferred drawing. And I never intervened, Aurora admitted, the realization still painful after weeks of therapy. I let Robert set impossible standards, let him make Nathan feel inadequate. And then after Robert died, I think I overcompensated, giving Nathan whatever he wanted, never setting boundaries, trying to make up for all those years of criticism. You did your best, Martha said gently. We all do, with the understanding we have at the time. Maybe, but I helped create the man Nathan became, someone who felt entitled to take whatever he wanted, who resented any boundary or limitation. Aurora watched as Sophie carefully navigated around a crack in the sidewalk. And now Sophie is paying the price for our mistakes. Sophie has you, Martha pointed out. That's not a small thing. You're breaking the cycle. Before Aurora could respond, a car pulled up at the curb, a nondescript sedan with government plates. Ms. Winters emerged, carrying her ever-present portfolio. Sophie abandoned her bicycle on the lawn, running to greet the social worker. Ms. Diane, did you bring the papers? Can I stay with Grandma now? Ms. Winters smiled, ruffling the child's hair. Let me talk to your grandmother first, okay? Keep riding your bike for a few minutes. As Sophie reluctantly returned to her bicycle, Ms. Winters approached the porch. Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. How are things going with the overnight visits? Wonderfully, Aurora said, gesturing for the social worker to join them. Sophie's been sleeping well, eating well. She seems more relaxed every time she stays. Winters sat in the wicker chair opposite the swing. I've observed the same improvements. Her summer school teacher reports she's more focused, less anxious. Her interactions with peers have normalized. Have you spoken with Nathan and Vanessa? Aurora asked cautiously. She maintained careful neutrality about Sophie's parents in the child's presence, but she worried constantly about their influence. Ms. Winters nodded. Several times. They've moved into a small apartment in North Portland. Nathan has found employment with a shipping company, entry-level but stable. Vanessa is working part-time at a home decor store. And Sophie's visits with them? Supervised as ordered by the court. Generally positive, though there's some tension. Nathan appears to be attending anger management classes as required, and both parents have initiated counseling. Aurora absorbed this information silently. Part of her, the mother part, felt relief that Nathan was stabilizing his situation. Another part, the wounded part, remained wary, skeptical that such fundamental behaviors could change. I've completed my assessment, Ms. Winters continued. Based on Sophie's improvement in your care, the stability of your home environment, and the ongoing concerns about her parents' situation, I'm recommending that Sophie be placed with you as her primary residence for the next 6 months with supervised visitation for her parents. Aurora's heart leapt. She would live here with me. With regular reassessment, yes. It would be temporary legal guardianship, not permanent custody. The goal remains family reunification if Nathan and Vanessa can demonstrate stability and appropriate parenting. Relief and concern warred within Aurora. And if they can't, Ms. Winters' expression turned serious. Then we'd need to consider more permanent arrangements. But that's further down the road. For now, we're focusing on what's best for Sophie immediately, and that appears to be the stability you provide. After discussing logistics and signing preliminary paperwork, Ms. Winters departed, promising to return the following week to help transition Sophie to her new arrangement. Martha excused herself as well, heading home to prepare for a book club meeting. Aurora remained on the porch swing, watching Sophie ride endless loops on the sidewalk, her face alight with the simple joy of childhood. The months ahead would bring challenges, helping Sophie adjust to her new living arrangement, navigating the complex feelings toward Nathan and Vanessa, continuing her own healing journey. But for now, in this moment, Aurora allowed herself to feel the simplest emotion: gratitude. Gratitude for the home she had reclaimed. Gratitude for friends who had stood beside her in her darkest hour. Gratitude for the chance to provide Sophie with the security and love every child deserved. The house behind her was still not fully restored. Some changes, the kitchen renovation, the backyard patio, would remain at least for now. But they no longer felt like violations. They were simply features of her home's evolution chapters in its continuing story. Like Aurora herself, the house had weathered, an invasion had been damaged but not destroyed, and was now being reborn into something new, something that honored its history while embracing its future. "Sophie," she called, "how about some lemonade? I could use a helper in the kitchen." The child abandoned her bicycle without hesitation, racing up the porch steps with a grin. "Can we make cookies too? The snickerdoodles like last time." Aurora laughed, rising from the swing with renewed energy. "Absolutely. Your grandfather's secret recipe." Together they entered the house, not the house Aurora had built with Robert decades ago, nor the house Nathan and Vanessa had tried to claim, but a new creation altogether. Aurora's house, Sophie's sanctuary, their shared home, a place of healing, a place of new beginnings, a place of their own.